In the heart of Caracas, Isabella stood out with her flawless features. Her residence, adorned with state-of-the-art electronics, spoke volumes about her affluence. She firmly believed in the power of appearance, investing heavily in plastic surgeries and cosmetics, seeing them as pathways to a brighter future. Yet as dusk descended, the glamour faded, revealing a stark contrast, a family grappling with the agonizing pangs of hunger. Behind the facade of Isabella's borrowed beauty lay a sobering truth. Her country's economy in shambles. Money, devalued to the point where electronics cost less than food. Venezuela, a nation rich in oil, now finds itself in a quagmire of economic turmoil. Its people, once brimming with promise, are now entrenched in a relentless struggle for basic necessities. But how did a country with such immense resources find itself ensnared in the thorns of destitution? Can Venezuela recover from this crisis? And if so, what steps are necessary to rebuild its economy and improve the lives of its citizens? In the early 20th century, Venezuela was a country known for its coffee and cacao, but beneath its verdant hills and valleys lay a secret that would transform it forever. Before the Spanish conquistadors set foot on Venezuelan soil, the indigenous people had already discovered the black gold seeping through the land. They called it mine, using it for medicinal purposes and to waterproof their canoes. However, it wasn't until the early 1910s that the world would come to know the true extent of Venezuela's oil riches. Enter Juan Vicente Gómez, the iron-fisted ruler who saw the potential in the sticky pools of mine. He opened the doors to foreign investors, granting concessions to those who could turn the viscous liquid into a lucrative commodity. Among these was the Caribbean Petroleum Company, a subsidiary of the mighty Royal Dutch Shell. On a fateful day in 1914, the drill at the La Rosa field struck a gusher, spewing oil like a fountain of black rain. This discovery at the Maracaibo Basin was just the beginning. The Zumaque 1 well, later known as MG1, marked the birth of the Mene Grande field, a treasure trove that would place Venezuela on the global oil map. The rush was unstoppable. By the 1920s, over 100 foreign companies were drilling with abandon. However, Venezuela would soon become a classic example of the dreaded Dutch disease. In 1959, the discovery of a massive 2.7 trillion cubic meters of natural gas reserves in the northern regions of the Netherlands significantly enriched the country. Energy corporations quickly capitalized on this, extracting wealth from the gas fields. As a result, the natural gas sector flourished, leading to a marked increase in the international value of the Dutch guilder. This surge in value was due to other nations purchasing guilders to acquire Dutch natural gas. This economic windfall presented significant challenges for the Netherlands' other export industries. The stronger guilder made Dutch exports more costly for foreign buyers, as they had to purchase these goods with the higher valued currency. Similarly, domestic producers faced difficulties as Dutch consumers preferred importing cheaper goods from nations with weaker currencies. Consequently, the natural gas sector emerged as the predominant industry, which was not without its risks, including the fact that natural gas extraction does not require a large workforce. This situation led to widespread unemployment. This one industry completely dominated the whole Dutch economy for the worse, hence the term Dutch disease. Venezuela saw a similar surge in wealth due to oil discoveries. This led to the neglect of other sectors like agriculture and manufacturing. As oil prices fluctuated, Venezuela's economy experienced extreme volatility. In the early 20th century, Venezuelan farmers abandoned their ancestral lands to chase a piece of the oil wealth in the cities, creating a perfect storm of events. As global demand for oil and Venezuela's currency, the bolivar, soared, two critical effects emerged. Firstly, importing foreign goods became cheaper, while exporting goods became pricier. This led Venezuelan producers to struggle with exports, while consumers favored cheaper foreign products. Simultaneously, the world grappled with the Great Depression, prompting the United States to devalue the dollar against other currencies. In just a decade, the bolivar surged by 70%, ranking among the world's strongest currencies. This surge opened doors for Venezuelans to import luxury items, secure better jobs, and enjoy modern conveniences. However, this prosperity came at a cost, as Venezuela became heavily reliant on oil. By the late 1930s, everything in Venezuela, from business costs to wages and goods prices, revolved around its overvalued currency. The rapid urbanization also spiked living costs. By 1939, Caracas became the world's most expensive city to live in, resembling a distant diamond mining town controlled like a dictator's personal haven. Gomez, who passed away in 1935, had amassed immense wealth, ranking among Latin America's wealthiest individuals. He owned vast expanses of land and controlled various industries, such as paper, beef, and dairy, through monopolies. His influence extended to creating Venezuela's inaugural army, ensuring his dominion. Gomez stifled dissent and granted the government authority over all state incomes. Surprisingly, his death inadvertently transformed the Venezuelan government into entrepreneurs as they seized control of all his enterprises. Yet, his most enduring legacy was imprinting his authoritarian governance style onto successive Venezuelan leaders. The onset of World War II presented a pivotal moment for President Isaías Medina Angarita. Seeking to renegotiate terms with foreign oil companies, he appealed to President Roosevelt for assistance. With Mexico recently nationalizing its oil, Roosevelt dispatched legal advisors to aid Venezuela in negotiations. This led to the enactment of a new oil law in 1943, known as the 50-50 principle, granting the Venezuelan state an equal share in oil profits. However, a challenge arose when lawmaker Juan Pablo Pérez Alfonso revealed that this arrangement rendered Venezuelan oil less profitable than their Middle Eastern counterparts. To counter this, Venezuela translated the principle and approached Middle Eastern nations. Consequently, these nations adopted similar laws, revitalizing Venezuela's oil industry profitability. Yet Venezuela remained unprepared for the upcoming decade's upheavals. After World War II, the thirst for oil surged globally. At the same time, the Middle East was embroiled in geopolitical strife, with Egypt shutting down the Suez Canal and Iran taking control of its oil sector. This turmoil sent oil prices soaring, and Venezuela, rich in black gold, found itself flush with foreign currency. The government, bowing to public clamor, used the windfall to slash gas prices, giving Venezuelans the cheapest fuel on the planet. Yet the people's appetite for prosperity grew. They wanted a larger slice of the pie. The military, seizing the moment, became the puppeteer of Venezuelan politics for years to come. The ousting of Medina led to a civilian junta taking power, and for a brief moment, democracy seemed possible with the introduction of universal suffrage and the first democratic elections. But this glimmer of hope was short-lived as the military once again stepped in, this time installing the dictator, Pérez Jimenez. Jimenez ruled with an iron grip, silencing opposition, persecuting his foes, and manipulating the 1952 election under the guise of ensuring accuracy. Despite his tyranny, Venezuela's wealth grew daily, attracting Western companies like bees to honey. With minimal taxes, scant regulations, and a burgeoning consumer base flush with cash, business thrived as long as it didn't cross Jimenez. Envisioning a dazzling future for Venezuela, Jimenez embarked on ambitious projects. He rebranded the nation as the Republic of Venezuela, launched state-owned industries, and initiated grand public works. It was a time of opulence and grandeur, but at the cost of freedom and democracy. Jimenez had a vision to catapult Venezuela into the future with the power of petrodollars. He dreamed of a nation where the poor would have roofs over their heads, education accessible to all, and health would be a right, not a privilege. The country began to weave a network of highways, connecting people in places like never before. Venezuela was to be a showcase of progress, with gleaming infrastructure, luxurious hotels, and gourmet restaurants to dazzle visitors from abroad. Corporations basked in the glow of easy loans and subsidies, while the military's loyalty was bought with lavish funding. But as time went on, the sheen of Jimenez's modern Venezuela began to tarnish. The grand projects, once symbols of hope, became monuments to mismanagement, riddled with graft and inefficiency. Highways, underused, industries, hemorrhaging money, public services, promising much but delivering little. The final straw came when Jimenez failed to keep his word to the military. In January 1958, his closest advisors turned against him, and in a whirlwind of panic, he fled to the Dominican Republic, his suitcases stuffed with cash. Back home, the economy was in disarray. The bolivar, grossly overvalued, had crippled industries unrelated to oil. The few businesses that survived were bloated with employees. Productivity was a myth, and wages bore no relation to skill, only to the whims of the oil market. The dream? To land a cushy government job, perhaps pocket a few bribes, and find ways to tap into the ever-flowing oil revenue. Despite heavy investment in social programs and job-creating state enterprises, unemployment remained a specter haunting the nation. To quell discontent, the government kept food prices artificially low, strangling the already suffering agricultural sector. In this distorted economy, the Venezuelan people's relationship with money began to twist and turn, adapting to a reality where oil was both the savior and the curse. The second attempt at democracy emerged through a pact between major political parties. However, unique circumstances and abundant oil revenue created an unusual environment. This new democracy lacked the usual checks and balances since it didn't rely on taxes from the population. Consequently, the president gained immense unchecked power, leading to authoritarian tendencies and a focus on personal wealth. Unfortunately, the economy didn't promote hard work, which led to widespread corruption throughout the political system. Despite these challenges, Venezuela experienced rapid economic growth. Subsequent presidents aimed to increase revenue from oil companies, leading to the formation of OPEC in the 1960s. This marked a significant shift as oil-producing nations, not just companies, began influencing prices and production levels. The journey of Venezuela's democracy was tumultuous, marked by a struggle for accountability, unchecked power, and economic complexities driven by oil wealth. This era also highlighted the pervasive issue of corruption that plagued various levels of government. The formation of OPEC represented a milestone in international petroleum relations, shifting control from companies to nations. This shift had far-reaching implications, reshaping how oil markets operated globally. In the autumn of 1973, the geopolitical landscape was rocked by a seismic shift in oil politics. The West's backing of Israel during the Yom Kippur War led to a retaliatory oil embargo by Arab nations, lasting nearly 6 months. The result? Oil prices skyrocketed to an unprecedented $14 per gallon. Venezuela, not supporting the embargo, suddenly found its coffers tripling with petrodollars. Former oil minister Perez Alfonso issued a dire warning. The influx of $10 billion could overwhelm the nation. "We have a president with a mountain of gold to dispense," he said, foreseeing a scramble for a share of the wealth. Indeed, the sudden wealth was a deluge that Venezuela struggled to channel. The country teetered on the brink of an economic emergency, with officials fearing that the surge in cash flow would send inflation spiraling out of control. In response, President Perez took bold steps. He increased wages across the board, poured funds into social programs, and mandated job creation in every conceivable sector. Despite these efforts, inflation began its relentless climb, reaching 12% annually. By 1974, Venezuelans had learned a hard lesson. Leaving money in banks was tantamount to watching it evaporate. With banks compelled to maintain low loan rates, spending and borrowing became the order of the day. The middle class ballooned to encompass 58% of the population, enjoying prosperity like never before, oblivious to the fragile foundation their economy rested upon. The government's attempt to establish a savings fund for excess oil revenue was well-intentioned but ultimately futile, as it became a slush fund for future administrations. The public sector swelled to an unwieldy 300,000 employees, and new labor laws made it nearly impossible for companies to lay off workers, even as wages soared. The largest corporations, now dependent on state handouts, thrived, while smaller businesses, starved of government support, folded. A mere 9% of the largest bloated companies came to produce 75% of all goods. Amidst this, the president initiated the gradual nationalization of the oil industry, setting a deadline of 1983. The writing was on the wall for foreign oil companies, which halted investments long before nationalization became a reality. In the 1980s, Venezuela faced a severe debt crisis triggered by a sudden oil price plunge. This caught everyone off guard, from regular folks to top leaders. The country's heavy reliance on oil money led to a false sense of security, with businesses and people betting on an overvalued currency. But when oil prices crashed, the money flow slowed down drastically. President Luis Herrera Campins, dealing with mounting debts, took drastic steps that strained the economy more. He increased foreign debt fourfold and tapped into the nationalized oil fund. Still, with less money coming in, Campins had to sharply devalue the bolivar, known as Black Friday. The impact was harsh and immediate. Living costs shot up, making basics unaffordable as Venezuela depended heavily on imports. To stop money from leaving the country, Campins put capital controls in place and fixed exchange rates. Venezuela's reliance on the global market became painfully clear as it struggled to pay bills with low oil prices. Inflation soared, making saving money pointless due to its rapid loss in value. This period exposed Venezuela's economic weaknesses, showing the need for diverse income sources and careful financial management. During this chaos, people turned to unethical practices like corruption and the black market. Officials sold dollars at special rates, leading to big profits on the black market. Food price controls caused panic buying and worsened shortages. In 1989, the economy shrank by 10%, pushing President Perez to take tough measures like ending price controls, raising gas prices, and cutting spending. This caused more devaluation, higher gas prices, and violent protests that had to be put down by the military. Poverty surged dramatically by 1989, revealing deep government corruption. Former presidents faced embezzlement charges, and foreign firms exploited the system through bribery. However, people didn't see the importance of saving their oil wealth, preferring dictator stability. This dissatisfaction peaked in February 1992 with a socialist military coup attempt cheered by many tired of corruption. The failed coup, led by Hugo Chavez, marked a turning point. Despite his arrest, Chavez became a symbol of hope against corruption. After his release, Venezuela's problems deepened over a period of 6 years, with a banking crisis and high inflation. Society demanded change, propelling him to power in 1998 with promises to fight corruption and inequality. Chavez, once a military officer, transformed into a socialist leader, promising a new era of reform. During his campaign, Chavez promised to uphold democracy and protect private property rights. But as time passed, he grew fond of Fidel Castro and socialist Cuba, even hosting Castro's 75th birthday. This shift surprised many and got them curious, leading to support for Chavez's plan to change how Venezuela was run. With public approval, Chavez made big changes, like creating a new Congress full of his supporters and renaming the country the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, starting what he called the Bolivarian Revolution. In 2001, he made 49 new laws, giving the government power to take land and split up large farms. He also passed a new petroleum law to involve the state more in managing the oil industry. Although the state-owned oil company, PDVSA, had some freedom, Chavez's changes aimed to bring it more under government control. PDVSA began working with foreign companies to get capital and know-how, offering them good deals. But critics said Venezuela's oil business still had a lot of foreign influence, accusing him of secretly privatizing it. Chavez's moves in the oil sector had mixed results. Oil production went up after a slump, but PDVSA lost its independence as a profit-driven company. Before, it focused on making money and paying less to the government. But Chavez wanted a different approach, so he put his inexperienced allies in charge of PDVSA, causing unrest. This interference led to protests at PDVSA and a short-lived coup against Chavez. A big strike followed, stopping oil production for 2 months and costing Venezuela a lot of money. To fix this, Chavez fired thousands of workers and called dissenters enemies of the state. Worried about the economy and oil troubles, people rushed to change their money into foreign currencies. Chavez then introduced exchange controls. To fight high prices, he put limits on prices and made banks give cheap loans to key areas and people. Despite early problems like inflation and debt, Venezuela's economy got better eventually. Price controls, cheap loans, and fixed currency rates brought some stability, but also raised worries about the future. Chavez's policies made a complex economy with short-term calm but long-term weaknesses. Relying on oil money and meddling in the economy set the stage for later problems. When oil prices went up again in the 2000s, Chavez didn't save the extra money. Instead, he spent it on big social programs to help the poor. This boosted living standards for many, leading to more spending on luxury items and enjoying cheap fuel, like in the good old times of the 1970s. Even with these gains, Chavez stayed focused on his idea of 21st century socialism. He took over big industries, taxed foreign companies more, and called out neoliberal capitalists as the problem, not his policies. He saw inflation as a tool used by outside forces to exploit Venezuela, a view many agreed with, blaming external forces for their economic troubles instead of looking closer at home. Following Chavez's death, Venezuela harnessed its vast oil reserves, the largest in the world, to fuel its economy. Remarkably, the government claimed 90% of the profits from each oil barrel, a national revenue source that foreign companies had no say over. However, the economic prosperity experienced during Chavez's tenure and before wasn't a result of strategic policies, but rather the fluctuating global oil prices. Chavez, unfortunately, did not set aside funds from this oil wealth. Instead, he expanded the public sector with companies that often struggled with inefficiency. Investments that could have spurred productivity were overlooked, and attempts to revitalize agriculture didn't bear fruit. His policies also led to a complex currency situation, where official exchange rates and black market rates diverged wildly. Venezuelans were permitted to exchange their currency for up to $2,000 annually for travel purposes. Any unused funds from their trips were often smuggled back and sold on the black market, a practice so lucrative it could yield 7 times the annual minimum wage. Generations living in this distorted economy have left Venezuelans with a skewed perception of money and economics. With inflation rates soaring to unimaginable heights, sometimes up to 10,000%, people would hastily take out loans to purchase anything of value, knowing that by the time repayment was due, the amount owed would be minuscule due to the rapid devaluation of the currency. In times of scarcity, instead of food, they bought luxury items like satellite TVs and electronics, and when those were gone, they turned to cosmetic surgery. Maintaining one's appearance became a peculiar form of investment in a world where money lost its value. Then, the crisis struck. In 2008, the world saw oil prices take a dip, and by 2014, they had taken a nosedive. This spelled trouble for Venezuela, a country that hadn't prepared for such a rainy day. Unlike nations such as Saudi Arabia, Russia, and Norway, which had tucked away funds for unforeseen circumstances, check out our video on Norway, where we explain this in more detail, Venezuela found itself in a tight spot. The country's economy wasn't varied enough to withstand the shock. It was like putting all your eggs in one basket and then dropping it. They hadn't grown enough food to be self-sufficient, and now they couldn't afford to bring in what they didn't produce. Fast forward to 2024, and the picture is bleak. Venezuela's economy is in shambles. A staggering number of its citizens have left their homes, seeking refuge elsewhere. Those who remain face a dire reality. Hunger is widespread. By 2019, inflation skyrocketed to a staggering 65,000%. At the helm is Maduro, the successor to Chavez. He continues to walk the path laid out by his predecessor, but with each step, the remnants of democracy crumble a bit more. The Venezuelan people, who once hoped oil would be their golden ticket, are now enduring hardships greater than ever before. The promise of oil has turned into a curse, leaving the nation in a struggle for survival and a quest for a brighter future. What's your take on Venezuela's economic crisis? Share your insights in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button to stay informed about global economic issues.